Hello everyone. I hope you can hear me, and let me welcome you to this second session of this year's APAC online conversations. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Douglas Gautier. I'm the Artistic Director and CEO of the Adelaide Festival Centre, and it's been my privilege to have been Chairman of APAC since 2013. Some of you may know we've opened this session to the public, and we do really hope to engage with more colleagues in the arts and cultural industries throughout Asia Pacific and internationally, of course. And so we're a platform that really always welcomes networking, sharing and learning, particularly in these difficult times. And they are difficult times, as I think we all know. Today's speakers, and we're very pleased to have some really distinguished and interesting speakers with us. Today's speakers include Sarah Ellis, Director of Digital Development from the Royal Shakespeare Company, Kay Vasey, the Chief Connecting Officer, Mesh Minds, Guo Jian Hong, the Artistic Director of the Theatre Practice, and all of these speakers and the discussion will be moderated by our interlocutor, Faith Tan, who's the Head of Dance and International Development at the Esplanade Theatres on the Bay. And so I'd like to thank you all for your time and contribution. We're really looking forward to what you're going to be talking about today. I'd also like to take this opportunity just to flag, to share that our upcoming virtual conference, our annual conference, will be held from the 28th to 29th of October this year. And we're also currently seeking proposals for our Connecting series. Rochelle Tan, our Secretary General, APAC Secretary General, will provide more information after this session. So do stay on the line for that. So finally, speaking of the Secretariat, I'd like to thank Jack and Rochelle for their planning and organising today's event. I hope you'll enjoy the session and that you'll come back and join us for more in the future. And now I'll hand it over to Faith Tan. Thank you.
Thank you, Douglas. Hello, a warm welcome to everyone. My name is Faith Tan. I'm the Head of Dance and International Development at the Esplanade in Singapore, and I'm very pleased to be moderating this session today. So in the past 10 years, digital technology has entered into almost every aspect of our lives, from our daily personal and work communications to bigger shifts in global economies. Technology influences our behaviors, the way we think, feel, and act and connect. And within the field of work that we do, the arts, the integration of digital technology has been accelerated by the pandemic. Many of us here have spent the last 2 years re-examining, testing, learning all aspects of challenges and potentials when presenting our work in the digital realm. And most of us have asked ourselves, how can we best create and present works on digital stages? How do we engage and sustain audiences in new ways? We question the notions of liveness and translation in performance on these digital platforms. And ultimately, I think we're asking how the arts can continue to not just incorporate technology, but to transform it on its own and creative artistic terms, so that we can continue to inspire, to innovate, and provoke new ways of thinking and experiencing in the world today. So alongside these big questions are how to develop new strategies, infrastructures, funding, and partnerships so that we can create supportive conditions for digital transformations. So we're very pleased today to be having a lovely panel who is able to share with us their perspectives and their experiences on this subject, each representing very different roles and contexts within this ecosystem. So at the end of the sharings that we have, we'll also have time for questions from you. So you can ask your questions on camera at the end of the sharings, but you can also feel free to type them in the chat box along the way. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Sarah Ellis, an award-winning producer currently working as the Director of Digital Development for the Royal Shakespeare Company in the UK. In 2013, she was listed in the 100 most influential people working in gaming and technology by the Hospital Club and Guardian Culture. She is an industry champion for the Creative Industries Policy and Evidence Center, which informs academic research on the creative industries. And she has been appointed chair of the digital agency, The Space, established by the Arts Council England and the BBC. Hi, Sarah.
Hello, and thank you for that lovely introduction, Faith. It makes me sound really busy, which I am. So that's lovely and wonderful. And it's lovely to be here on such a distinguished panel. It's an absolute privilege, and it's great to be with you today. I'm going to share my screen, and I think talk about, just before I share the slides, let's just talk about how technology has impacted the arts from our perspective at the RSC, how we've approached technology, how we've also used it as organisational change, but also transformative change for us to really connect with audiences. And I suppose it's also important to say that the work that we've done has been over the last 10 years effectively, and in that the pandemic obviously has been a huge disruptor and a huge moment for us, and we're coming through that at the moment. So I'm going to sort of share with you pre-pandemic, but also how that moment has really how we've had to hold what we are about at this moment and how we're coming through that. It is I think really important when I share what we're sharing today. So bear with me one moment. I work with technology all the time, but still the most stressful aspect
everything else is like almost there.
So I think someone to mute.
Can someone just check that you've muted your sound? Thank you.
Amazing, thank you. And obviously I work for the Royal Shakespeare Company, but to quote another UK cultural icon, tomorrow belongs to those who see it coming. And I've been really reflecting recently what will be our big opportunities and challenges over the next 10 years. And I keep coming back to the fact that this moment and this generation will be the only time where we have people who were born pre-internet in the workforce alongside people that were born with the internet and born with digital. And I think that's a super interesting time for us. But at the moment, that's also a moment where we could be really far apart, or we could really come together in quite amazing ways. So for me, this quote by David Bowie is a really important thing to think about: optimism and hope, and how we look at the future together. So this is my home. This is my work home in Stratford-upon-Avon. And, you know, for thousands of years, people have come together around theatre and had a shared experience. And in Stratford-upon-Avon, every night, this theatre would have been full of about 1,000 people where we come together and we have a shared experience. And it's been that way for a really long time. And theatre's always had a relationship with technology. The candlelight was a technology. Electricity has been a technology and a tool for theatre. And what we've seen over the past few years is new technologies coming in through the digital age that we are adapting into our theatre making toolkit. Back in 2016, it was the 400th anniversary of Shakespeare's death, and to look at the final production that we wanted to do in that year, we looked at Shakespeare's last play, and arguably one of his innovative and most magical plays. And for the first time ever, we brought together a technology company who collaborated with us and used real-time motion capture technology and game engine technology as a form of puppetry on our live stage. And a world first was that we had a digital avatar performing live on stage with live actors. And as you can see here, this is the stage. This is Simon Russell Beale performing Prospero, and you will see Mark Courtley performing as a live actor, but his digital avatar on this 40-foot moving projection surface. We used motion capture technology, we used the Unreal game engine, and it was a moment for us to bring these technologies into the stage that everyone experienced. And for that also, it created a huge spark within the company to think about the possibilities and to think about what might be achievable if we worked with these technologies and they expanded our toolkit. And then from that, what we did was we thought, actually, let's look at the sector more broadly, not just at the RSC, but let's look at live performance more holistically. And in the UK, there was a fund called Audience of the Future, and we were successful in bringing together a consortium of other companies, Punch Drunk, Philharmonia Orchestra, Manchester International Festival, and the digital studio Marshmallow Laser Feast, alongside technology companies and universities and research partners. And I think what that did for us is, instead of us innovating on our own, I feel really strongly that we should be innovating and exploring this with others, and collaboration and partnership, because only brilliant things can come through partnership, because that's where you test your own practice, and that's where you also can work with others that may have strengths that you do not have within your own practice, that allows you to innovate and think differently. And this resulted in a performance called Dream this March this year, which you can still see online, and I'll share the link in the chat after I've talked. But it was a live online performance set in a virtual forest. And this is the bit where I want to talk about the pandemic and what happens when you have constraint. So in that March, in that moment of the pandemic, we had to shut our theatres, and we haven't been able to bring back those audiences into our spaces. But we had to create this work. We were in production on it. We had to stop production immediately. And in that moment, we had to make sure people were safe. We had to make sure our freelancers were paid. We were due to use these new technologies. We were due to do a performance in Stratford-upon-Avon, and we just couldn't do it. So what we did was we did a piece of audience research, and we asked our audiences what they wanted. And there were three things that came back to us overwhelmingly. Audiences were craving liveness, where they were craving togetherness, but there is a huge digital inequity in people's homes. We do not all have the same access to digital technology. We can provide that when you come to our spaces, but if we look at what people have in their homes and how they can receive content, it's not equitable. And we weren't going to be able to create a performance that people could come to. We were having to create a performance where we would need to reach people in their homes. So automatically, it's made us think about how we created the most cutting edge, wonderful performance, but for your phone, your tablet, your desktop, but not only that, a phone that may not be the most cutting edge iPhone, that's the newest one on the market, but one that might be 5 years old, and vice versa. And that was so important that we think about where what technology is in people's hands and how they can access it. So the key technologies that we used were motion capture again, and you can see here we were using the most cutting edge facial tracking recognition, and we were continuing to work with our actors, who are the best storytelling technology there is to create this performance. In a COVID environment, we were able to create a 7-meter volume performance space, everyone COVID safe, working together. And the screen in the background is the screen what audiences would have seen on their computers, on their televisions. That was the world that the audiences were seeing, but this was the performance that was happening in real time. These performers were working in 7-meter by 7-meter volume. The actual world that we built in a game engine was 7 kilometers by 7 kilometers. That was the forest that we made. This is Peas Blossom, a character in the play. And here you can see Mustard Seed performing into the iPhone, her face, and the images that you're seeing is Puck. And you could help Puck along their way with a form of interactivity as well. So we were trying to find the connection points between audiences, not just broadcast a performance to them, but find ways that they could participate with us and know it was live. We were also able to play with scale, not looking at puppetry as just one-to-one, but we were looking at different characters and the way that the character puck could be a tiny aspect of the forest or grow. And this is Maggie Bain. And again, you can see the performer is watching herself perform in the volume, and audiences will have been witnessing this all live in their homes. It was a performance where actors were having to support each other, and we were working with aerialists and puppeteers to achieve that. And this is the bit that we hadn't built before. Because we are looking at technology now and audiences and how they travel in the future, and where they will have experiences with us live in person. But now our homes are cultural spaces. And how do we welcome audiences in, and how do we make them feel like they're coming to an event? We needed to create a portal into that space that allowed you to feel that you were coming into the world of a play. And so we created Dream.online, and the audience experience and how we drew them into that was as important as the work we were making. So we set up pre-show and onboarding experiences where we can't make assumption that all our audiences will just know how to access this work. And artists are now thinking not just about that content that they make, but thinking about how that audience welcomes comes in, how we get them to feel part of it, and also how we get them the feeling that people want to share. And I think that how we're looking at those approaches and mindsets to presenting our works is developing, where the convergence between what a piece of artistic content is and where the audience sits within that, and what their agency is growing and connecting. We had 65,000 people see Dream through 10 performances in a week in a pandemic. We had a ticker that people could see, know how many people were coming into that performance. We were trying to create that feeling that you get when a press night happens and you get that buzz of audiences coming into the building. And so we had that online where people couldn't wait to take their seats, where people were all ready to be in that midsummer forest, where they were already excited to be there. And this was the beautiful thing that they shared, their own spaces, how they set up their own homes to witness this performance with us together at the same time. And I think that that's the really important thing about how we look at this work going forward, about new forms of engagement, about hybrid production, where we can have super live, and that if you're far away, that doesn't mean that you're far away from this experience, that you can be really close to this experience. And that our audiences are really, really close to us wherever they are in the world. And that's a significant shift that the pandemic has created. And finally, those are the principles I feel that I think we've learned through collaboration and partnership at the RSC, and what we take forward is put people first, celebrate and recognize different expertise from different industries. Shift your culture to accept risk and flatten those hierarchies and give people space to play and experiment, and also develop transformational leaders through this and give them the skills and the enthusiasm to deliver that. But most importantly, measure your innovation through your financial return. As we move forward post-pandemic, we'll be looking at new commercial models for this work, so we're able to sustain it for future artists and future audiences. Thank you. I think I now hand over to Rochelle.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was very insightful. And I think many of our colleagues also attended Dream as well from Singapore. So we were able to have that wonderful experience. So moving on to our next speaker, Kay Vassie. She is the Chief Connecting Officer of Mesh Minds, a creative technology studio blending the worlds of art and technology with powerful partnerships to drive awareness, ignite conversations, and inspire behavioral change for the sustainable development of people and our planet. She is also the founder of the Mesh Minds Foundation, which is a registered not-for-profit arts organization that empowers artists in Asia to focus on the sustainable development of people and also our environment and the planet. Thank you, Kay, for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. What an amazing presentation to follow as well. And it just reminds me of when I was 10 years ago at Head of Arts of the British Council, you know, so, I mean, and then we're only just starting to talk about the effect of digital technology on the way that art is being produced and consumed. And then, you know, we've only been in business for like 4 years. So, you know, it's quite amazing to know that, you know, Sarah's been working, Sarah's been working on this for, you know, over 10 years and all the amazing experience that she has. So thank you so much, super inspirational. Yeah, we'll just go to the next slide. So this is me, I'm Kay. This is me meeting Tim Cook. It was really amazing. On that day, he said, you know, our augmented reality experience that was teaching children about how we get to clean seas and have oceans that are kind of going to provide livelihoods and food and everything for you know, for future generations is exactly what they wanted to see Apple technology being used for. As I said, you know, a bit more about me. I was Head of Arts of the British Council before, and after that I kind of skipped out and I had to go back to the UK, but then I kind of retrained as a tech lawyer. And then when I was actually being that tech lawyer, I was actually starting to realize that a lot of these companies like Autodesk, Facebook, Google, they were starting to really focus on creativity. So for example, Autodesk had this artist in residence program called Pier 9. Every quarter, they had 25 different artists go to their humongous facility, which had huge industrial 3D printers and all sorts of amazing software that these artists could actually get their hands on. And then as a cohort, go through together and understand how that they can use all of the Autodesk kind of software to really revolutionize what they were doing. Facebook also has artist in residence programs, Google Arts and Culture. If you've never, you know, searched around on their website, have a look. There's some really amazing experiments that they do. So yeah, so I realized that actually, you know, kind of staring out of the window in my technology law office, just feeling quite bored and really like, is this what my life is going to be like? Realizing that actually art x tech was a really kind of burgeoning area, but I knew that from my own background, I really wanted to do stuff for good, because if you only end up at art and tech, you can easily end up with like a bunch of zombie games or crazy cat memes. So I knew that I wanted to do something for people and planet, but started to kind of like look around and do my research and realize that actually there's hardly any creative technology education programs in Singapore, let alone the rest of Southeast Asia. So was there an opportunity here? So we go to the next slide. This is when I reached out to the Art Science Museum and I said, look, you know, I really want to bring together art and tech for good. Is there a way that we maybe be able to work together? So we created our first flagship program and we called it Please Insert Human, because also I really wanted to make sure that it wasn't just about technology. We had to remember humans are at the center of everything that we do. Please don't create technology for technology's sake. So in thinking through how do we bring together awesome people with some great partners. I really echo what Sarah was saying about growth through partnerships. It's fundamental to everything that we do. How do we then bring those people and partners together on a program and then actually enable the development of those wonderful creators over a series of mentoring and maybe giving them access to tools, workshops that the money can't buy. You can't just sign up for these things. So actually, you know, Autodesk flung open their doors and said, yeah, we don't normally let kind of normal members of the public come in, but why don't you bring these artists down and we can teach them how to do 3D printing, you know, those types of things. And then HTC Vive gave us a bunch of VR headsets. So, you know, over time, I was able to just say, look, I just really want to harness the creator community. So when I reached out to all the tech companies that I already had connections to because of being a tech lawyer, they were like, oh, great, this is a great opportunity, absolutely. And so we also then produce everything, right? So from the people, the partners, then you go on a program and there's a whole production at the end, okay? So that's kind of where we kind of like started, and Art Science Museum then invited us back for the second year. Then that's when Apple came on board. I tried really hard before that to get in touch with Apple, nothing, radio silence, couldn't find the right person, nothing. They then actually turned up to the show. On the final day, we were literally kind of almost kind of packing up and stuff. And it's like, okay, you're Kay, right? Can I just speak to you for a minute? And it so happened that it was the regional product team saying, we love this show. I see that there's lots of Lenovo computers here. Can we have our computers here next time? And I was like, we haven't even decided if we're going to do another show. Like, what do you mean? But like, okay, let's have a chat. A couple of weeks later, we're already working on show number 2. And then that's how we kind of eventually managed to be chosen to meet Tim Cook, because of all the work that we've done with Apple in terms of getting creative people, having those devices in their hands and making amazing things. So next slide. Fast forward to today. I'm so pleased that Please Insert Human has for the first time become Please Insert Women. On the 19th of August, we are going to be opening our first mini show. Okay, again, COVID friendly, etc. You know, we've had to do all of this, a lot of remote working, a lot of, you know, socially distanced workshops and all that kind of great stuff. But it's opening at Capella. It's going to be there for a whole month. It's free to go in, and it's supported by Net-a-Porter. What's Net-a-Porter got to do with art and technology and sustainability? I hear you cry. Well, it so happens that Net-a-Porter, which is a huge fashion platform, have Net Sustain. And their Net Sustain brand is guided by 9 principles that talk about, for example, things like considered ingredients, considered processes, design for circularity. So they've gathered together in one place on their website all of the really sustainable fashion and kind of, you know, beauty products and all sorts of things like that, just in one place so that people can shop sustainably really easily. But at the moment, it just exists on in just like a kind of website that just lists out the attributes. So what we've done is propose to them to work with 4 female artists from Singapore to then bring those key attributes to life using visual art techniques. So you'll be able to go to the exhibition, walk up to their beautiful static murals. However, using augmented reality technology from Facebook, which is going to allow you then to scan a little QR code. And whilst you're standing there marveling at the beautiful artwork, you'll be able to then put that, transform that art to wearable art for the face. So you'll be able to kind of have elements perhaps graying out of your head, or kind of like a kind of really amazing face mask, all made out of the elements that you see before you on that static mural. Okay. So I'm going to tell you a little bit. We're going to go in reverse order. So I'll end with some of the stuff that I talked about with the Art Science Museum. So before Please Insert Women, we had, what's next? Moo Pop. So this was one where we collaborated with 8 Singapore artists, and to usher in the year of the Ox, we incubated some artists who were then tasked with looking at aspects of Chinese culture, but also telling stories about our air pollution and our planet's biodiversity. So each of the artists were asked, would you like to pick one or more of the Sustainable Development Goals as your focus, but also try to weave in the Ox and all of the kind of resilience and perseverance and determination features of the Ox. So that I think they did a fantastic job, and we were able actually to put on Asia's first ever drive-through exhibition powered by electric vehicles. So you could not only go up and be experiencing the murals themselves in the gallery area, but then you're able to kind of be piloted around as well to see a whole car park full of these amazing installations, larger than life as well. Okay, next up. Sustainable Singapore. So this was from a digital presentation grant. Again, because of COVID, you know, the National Arts Council very kindly said, you know, I'm going to give out some grants that perhaps will help artists along the way. So what we did was we incubated 20 Singaporean artists. We did everything remotely in the sense that there was a 2-hour workshop, getting people to grips with Archivive, which is a very, very simple drag and drop interface for augmented reality. I'm really pleased to say that even despite this initially just being planned as a Singapore-only digital showcase, we were then able to tour it to Vienna, Austria at Archivive's gallery, but also then later to Art Busan in Korea. So it had kind of legs way beyond just these shores, which is really fantastic. Next up. Please Insert Human Shanghai was the one we did before that. That was actually China's first ever AR/VR art and animation incubation program. We took 10 visual artists who'd never ever tried a VR headset on in their lives, through how to use two things, quill and medium. Medium is basically sculpting a kind of piece of digital clay that can result, your file can instantly be 3D printed. Then from there, you can, we also used quill, and quill was for kind of creating virtual animations. But you can imagine, right, because this is virtual reality, the output can actually be stepped inside. And so you have, when you put that VR headset on, you can actually walk around these amazing worlds, basically, that these artists have created. And we're now also already talking to Facebook now after a 2-year hiatus because of COVID, etc., about how we can do more around this Please Insert Human program, which is really great to see. Next up, we also went to, we're very fortunate to travel to Bangkok as well, where we managed to partner with Rangsit University. And we literally were there for like 2 days, and we were able to incubate some local artists. And then they created these really cool, cute experiences for Bangkok Design Week. And, you know, again, we just said, we went in and we taught them how to get to grips with Procreate, so how to use your Apple Pencil to create everything in layers, and then from there, transform them into Spark AR experiences for Instagram. Okay. Last two, and these two were the ones at Art Science Museum that I mentioned at the beginning. So the 2.0 one was the one that was supported by Apple. So we incubated 20 of them. There was loads of different things. We had VR, AR, AI even, and the whole thing was supported by the UN Environment Programme as well. So we had someone from the UN Environment Programme actually come over from Bangkok and give a speech about how amazing that they thought it was that we were using frontier technologies such as AR and VR to then share important messages about the planet. And final one, this is where we started right at the beginning. God, it seems for me like 1,000 years ago, but this was our first show, AR, VR, IoT at the time. So we did all sorts of cool, we also did 3D printing as well. We collaborated, a really awesome collaboration with LaSalle. We had, 5,000 visitors just in that first 9 days, and really, really well received. And really I'm so thankful to everyone who came, and also the Art Science Museum for kind of giving us that first opportunity to then bring this art and tech for good mission to life. That's me. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Kay, for the sharing, really being a bridge between not just art and technology, but also meaningful and important social and sustainable issues into the collaborations. I think later we should definitely unpack how some of those that you've done so many projects, how some of those things were really like in terms of the challenges between the artists and the technologists as well. And we'll come back to that. For now, we have our last speaker for today, Guo Jianhong. She is the artistic director of the Theatre Practice, a theatre company in Singapore. She is an award-winning theatre director, lighting and set designer, and an independent filmmaker. Since 2020, Jianhong has been leading the practice team in developing hybrid digital live theatre, exploring the limits of artistic innovation and technological capabilities with their projects. Over to you, Jianhong, to share more.
Hello, you can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. I think this is the most talked about sentence in the last 1.5 years. Can you hear me?
It's true. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, can you see me? Can you hear me? Thank you for having me. And it's wonderful to be following two, exciting professionals, ladies who are also exploring new territories. Perhaps I would start with giving a little bit of an introduction of the theatre practice, because some of you may not know who we are. We just celebrated 56 years, and it started as a performing arts school by Kopao Kun and Golei Kwan. And so it was a theatre and dance school. Hence, education and advocacy is very much in our DNA. Can we go to the next slide? This is where we are. It's a, pretty luxurious for Singapore to have a space like this. We have 24 full-time staff, and over half are under 30 years old. I think what's unique about the company is that we are not specifically restricted by art form. We are under the NEC theatre scheme, but we we have been quite difficult to be pinned down. We have evolved quite a lot. But with 24 people, what is good about it is the structure within the company is quite complete. So we have people in every areas. So it allows us to be quite self-sufficient, especially when most of the people in the company are quite hyphenated. But this hyphenation, you know, multi-disciplinary, multi-specialty, multi-interesting has been something that we have been really focusing on developing in the last few years in terms of our own human resource. In this building, there is a black box that sits about 120. Pre-COVID, we program festivals. We do placemaking. As you see on the right-hand bottom corner, there's a little, you know, cafe, which is also a working space. We incubate new works and new initiatives. So we are a very rojak hybrid kind of company. Next slide, please. So flashback to last year, April 2020. We were doing this show. We're getting ready to do this show called Four Horse Road, which is a promenade theater piece. You walk, you know, 180 audiences walk around 3 buildings every night. Lots of human interaction, right? But COVID was happening and starting to be threatening. So we saw it coming, but in 2 months, we went through a whole relentless defense of the show to keep it going. But on the last day, when all shows have to be shut down, we were the last show. And we had to shut it down after 2 shows in a 30-show run. It was a big financial hit. You know, we lost over $300,000. We decided to pay everybody. But it was not just a financial hit, it was actually an emotional hit because everybody felt very demoralized. We hit the pits. But I think in retrospect, that was also a good thing because the only way up was up, right? There's no more illusions about it can get better soon. There was no more illusion about you know, maybe this will change quickly because there was no place else to go. It was extremely disempowering. And I think all of us went through the same thing. There was this fear of being forgotten, of being irrelevant, of losing our usefulness. So for the longest time, everybody was showing archive online because we just wanted to be present, right? At that moment, we had to regroup because we had to do some really deep soul searching. You just wanted to shut down and give up. And of course, you know, YouTube streaming, Facebook streaming, they're great. But you ask yourself, you know, it's not live theater. This is just a poorer cousin of TV, right? Where do we go from here? I think there's some commonality at that time. You know, when Andrea Bocelli sang Alone on the Italian Square, we all felt that loneliness and yet that need for human connection. But it is also a time where we are sharing more common experiences than we've ever had in the history of my lifetime. So we ask ourselves, next slide, please. We ask ourselves, what is our value? What are our strengths as theater makers, as live theater, live performing arts makers? How can we be useful? Because, you know, there are a lot more urgent fires to put out, right? A lot of the frontline healthcare workers were doing heroic stuff. How can we be useful? And really, who needs us? And, you know, the whole idea of what Peter Brook says, an empty space, right? It's a space where somebody's doing something, somebody's watching. That has just gone out the window. The space that we have all taken for granted for so long was gone. It's still gone in many ways right now, at least greatly damaged. So this need for human connection between artists and with our audience became something that took us to the next decision. Next slide, please. So we made a decision that we need to bring the show online and we need to start with theater for young audience because a lot of people were stuck at home. Parents have to work at home. Teachers who are parents have to teach and work at home while looking after their kids going to school. And a lot of people were having, you know, issues juggling. And we felt like, okay, if the little thing we can do is just to help them, occupy their kids in a useful way for a moment, that's something we can do. So we set out 2 basic principles for ourselves. Next slide, which is we want to do it live, and we wanted to have meaningful audience participation. So live means even if I can pre-record something and I can show it 20 times, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to run it every time, because every time when an audience comes in, I want them to be a part of it, and it has to be meaningful. So it's not just I see you as a number that jumps. What can you do, like a live theater, where your presence is going to change the trajectory of the show today, where your presence is going to be felt, or your presence is going to be felt by fellow audiences. Next slide. So we started with live streaming from homes in April last year on Facebook Live. We were also nervous who's going to show up, right? And then we ended up having 1,600 people coming on Facebook Live, which was shocking to us. Imagine we played to 120 in the black box. They were able to put in comments, vote for the stories they want to listen to, the elements that they wanted to add in, and actors improvise. But we felt them. We couldn't see them. It's still strange. Actors were acting to, dots on the wall and plastic bags in the corner. So we progress. We progress from there to we can see them, to they can participate, to camping in their homes. We sent materials to them. We spent 12 hours with them online, camping with them. So the biggest change is that we are conceptualizing these productions, works, reverse, right? A lot of times we thought if we build it, they will come. Now they can't even find the door or where's the stage, right? That has been taken away. So you actually have to go backwards and say, how do I reach out to the audience? Where are they? Where is the meeting point, that space that they're going to see us? So things that we have taken for granted or audiences that we have ignored, you have to bring them back, right? And when you think about it, you have to think about them as individuals because they are all each in their own space. So for example, the discovery we made is when you're in a theater and the kids, you want them to sing along and move along, it takes a lot longer for them to participate than if they're in their homes, in their pajamas, jumping on their couches, right? People discuss while they're watching the shows, which you don't do in theater. And there are different levels of participation, camera on, camera off, just like we are today. So you start having to be not snobbish about what is the right way. You start to have to think about what are the ways that are available to me. Beggars cannot be choosers. So you have to rethink what the relationship is. So we went into festivals. We did an entirely digital live festivals in July. In November, we did a 55-hour of live streaming, which we calculated later that is actually more than 2 days, that celebrated our 55th anniversary. And then we did, again, the Patch Festival this year again. And along the way, we also did a digital residency with artists from Italy, Taiwan. In fact, one was in quarantine in Taiwan and in Singapore. Loads and loads of projects, over 40 in about a year's time that we experimented with different permutations. And mind you, not with a lot of money because most of it were open source software or iPhones of older generations where you can have a button to press on, right? So that's where we started. And then we finally arrived to the project that I would like to share with you a little bit more in depth, which is a multi-platform digital interactive experience called The Bride Always Knocks Twice, Killer Secrets. So if we can take a look at the video.
Tok, I start ah.
Tempat ini sangat mengelirukan.
1、2、
等一下。
3。
似大家咁乜都攤開嚟講咧？
She needs to be taught a lesson.
就是不喜歡他的臉。
Ular kecil itu yang bisa dilakukannya hanya mendesis.
你们为什么要这样对我
How far would you go to silence her? I don't know. Maybe.
Okay, if we can go to the next slide. So what Bright Knocks Twice is, I have put the website on the site if you guys are interested in exploring it. It's actually 2 nights of commitment from an audience. You start with chapter 1, which is you watch a 40-minute video, a show that's pre-filmed to tell you who killed who and who are the suspects, right? Who got killed and what. And then chapter 2, you go in to interrogate the suspects. That's live, right? And chapter 3, you go online to a website to look at all the clues, 360 camera. And then chapter 4, you review the killer. And if you were to watch it on Monday, you will get the answer on Sunday. If you were to watch it on Saturday, you'll still get the answer on Sunday. So every viewing in terms of video broadcast is synchronized. And all the performers stand by live to have interrogation by the audience. Next slide, please. So what we have done along the way is we had to build our own digital theater. This was designed for a full capacity of 2,400 devices, which means more audiences. It was priced at $38 per device, $68 for 3, which is actually not cheap for digital content. And we were very surprised to hit slightly over 90% of capacity in 1 week's engagement. And of that, 10% was from overseas. And the website where the clues were had over 230,000 clicks. And in this process, we discovered a whole new audience, which is the gaming audience, right? We can end the slide here. So maybe to just wrap it up a little bit, before the pandemic, we had no resources to do digital theater, even though it was happening. Like for example, with RSCU, Sarah, you were doing it before the pandemic. But for most of the smaller companies and individual artists, we had no resources and no bandwidth and no reason to do it, right? Now, the pandemic has become a trigger or a catalyst. So now we have still no resources, but a lot more bandwidth and a lot more reason to do it. But I think that digital theater is not a band-aid and not a stopgap solution, especially also with our concerns with climate change. I think it's something that we seriously need to think about, and not to mention there are so many possibilities in it. And concerns with life, the Olympic is live. We're not there, but we feel very live. The concerns with space just open up infinitely. But there is also, in terms of demand for cross-discipline working and learning, as well as collaboration outside the arts, like with gaming, with travel, because Bright Knocks Twice was a collaboration with a hotel and a Singapore Tourism Board. But I think at this point, the most important thing with digital theater is this integration of art making, administration, and technology. They are all on the same plane. It used to be very siloed and you still sort of barely get away with it. But in this space, you really cannot. And I also do think that is a new opportunity for audience education and development, because they are also figuring out what this is, and they are extremely forgiving and embracing of things that are off sync, interruption, and blah, 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 blah. But I think as art makers, digital theater is really a redistribution of power. So the question is, how do we support artists, right? There are many participants here who have spaces, physical spaces, art centers, festivals, accessible spaces, but that relationship has evolved. Just having those spaces itself is not enough anymore. So it takes quite a bit of research and development. You need to invest in retooling the facilities, retraining the support workforce. You have to reimagine what that process of creation is. And I think even the outcome has to be greatly redefined. So for us, the digital theater creation is very scalable. It's not limited by, I need a lot of money, but you do have to experiment with it a lot. And for us, we have arrived at this point with all the art making, the content driving the development of technology. We have decided that we're going to build our own system. So we just got the funding approval from NAC actually 2 days ago, that we're going to build a hardware software system that is going to make it more cost efficient, to lower the technical threshold, and to develop the system specifically for the use for performers, because there are specific needs that's not out there. We need to capture performer, they need to see each other for monitoring, we need to queue them. And if they are all in different spaces, that is the other challenge, to deal with latency and bandwidth. So we have decided to embark on that, but that is also because of all the experimentation that allows us to build things for the performing arts. So imagine this is what we can do as a small company, right? And if you guys were to put in more, imagine what can be done. So I totally agree with Sarah that this is really an opportunity. And if space can be taken away from us, then a lot of assumptions that we had before can be thrown out the window too. Because really at this point, there's really nothing to lose. And so I'm just going to wrap it up here. And I look forward to all of us discovering more opportunities in the digital space. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tian Hong. I think you've given us a glimpse into the journey of re-examining an organization's fundamental mission and principles when we respond to the present day realities that the pandemic has brought to the arts and to a theatre company as well. So we've arrived now at the question and answer section of our talk. We have about 20 minutes for us to have a nice discussion together. You can start to post your questions in the chat, or if you'd like to come on camera and say hello and ask your questions, that's fine too. Just raise your digital hand and we'll get to you. We already have some comments flowing in. Maybe I can just start from the bottom to ask a question to Sarah. So from Melissa, it's very exciting to see how your company is using all the new technology, and definitely how you're reaching out to the potential to reach out to broader audiences. So in what ways do you think technology has enhanced or revolutionized the way Shakespeare is presented to audiences? And was there a significant increase in new audiences? Did you see your demographics and new audiences come after the digital projects that you've done?
That's a really, really good question. And I suppose to preface it, that technology has always enabled those Shakespeare stories. The printing press allowed us to be able to have those stories today. Film and broadcast in the 21st century allowed those stories to be shared, and now is no different. Yes, for Dream in particular, well, with The Tempest, yes, there was a huge, what was really great about that show is that our traditional audiences came in through the Shakespeare and walked away with the wonder of the technology. And then we had this new audience come in with the technology and then away with the Shakespeare. And there was a beautiful example of that when you ask younger audiences in particular what their favorite scene in the play was, and they always said the drinking scene between Sir Stefano and Trinculo, and there is absolutely no technology in that scene. It is just two actors being funny, drinking. So that's what this is about. It's about a convergence of people, and I think in a really polarized time, it's really important to bring people together, and how we achieve that. And that what we have to do is stay true to the storytelling and make sure that those stories are communicated. But how those stories are shared and communicated needs to have a relevance to the people experiencing them. And Dream in particular really pushed us. So in that one, we were really pushing the innovation, and we were really putting ourselves in what I would call a very, very new space. And we had 40% of those audiences were Gen Y and Gen Z. And that is a phenomenal statistic for a company like ours. And again, what we're going is, what do you do with that? How do you go that this is more comfortable to people who aren't us than people who are us? That's a beautiful thing. And how do we hold that is a challenge as much as an opportunity. But yes, we have seen really profound interest in this from people we haven't yet connected with.
Can I just add on to that comment and ask, do you have some thoughts you can share about your strategies towards, now that you have engaged these new generations of audiences that maybe you didn't see as many of when you were doing just live shows? What are some thoughts and approaches moving forward post? I mean, we're still very much in the pandemic, but I'm curious in the next few years, how you're thinking towards engaging them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about content really, and we've got to look at the content, the people that make that content with us and who they are and what stories we share and how we share them. So I think the real important aspect of that is we've seen people's delight and wonder, and now we need to kind of check ourselves on you've got to create a retention and an authenticity of what that's about, and that actually the challenge is continuing to challenge and reinterpret those stories for now. And so we have to work with people that are prepared to give that lens. And I think that's the challenge for us, is to think about the new makers that we want to bring in to look at those stories in a completely different way.
Yeah, thank you. We have another question here to Kay, and some feedback to say it's wonderful to see how many countries and communities your work has impacted. And from country to country, you might have found interesting cultural differences in the way artists and creative technologists interact with each other. But I think the big question here is also, what factors do you think make for a conducive environment for art and tech exploration, especially because you're really in between and you can understand both the language from the artist's concerns as well as the world that the creative technologists exist in. So I think we'd love to hear a bit more about your insights into that.
Sure, thank you. So yeah, in terms of like cultural differences, not so much. I mean, we've run projects across Asia, right? So I think the language barrier we obviously had to get over, but we achieved that by obviously having Chinese and Thai real-time translators throughout the workshop, so that we kind of were able to kind of get around that barrier. But you know, what kind of unites everyone that's been on our programs is this kind of real can-do attitude, this kind of like I'm able to kind of try things without being afraid to fail, because you know, technology makes things great, but it also breaks all the time. So, you know, you just have to be kind of alive to being, you know, just wanting to try stuff out. I must say that I always remember this story of Dawn Ng, who's also known as AAPPAC, and she was creating a virtual reality experience for our very first show, which was all around good health and well-being, Sustainable Development Goal 3. And there was like this whole really crazy mystical landscape and stuff. And she actually was sitting directly with Tech Lee Tan, who was her assigned creative technologist. And together they were making this VR experience. And she leant forward accidentally and pressed the mouse a bit too much. And all of the kind of sea level or water level just went right up. But then it was such a happy accident, because all of the mountains then ended up in this kind of really kind of ethereal, mystical, floating landscape. And they actually kept it that way. So without even planning to do so, they kind of stumbled across something that made the whole experience even better. In terms of factors that are conducive to this kind of environment, obviously we need access to the tools. You know, you need to have access. If you're going to create a VR experience, you need to have access to a headset. You know, if you want to create really amazing, you know, digital drawings that that kind of come to life, it is useful, very useful, for example, to use an iPad with an Apple Pencil if that's your kind of medium, you know. So definitely the tools, the software, that kind of stuff. Then training, obviously, but the good thing is that there's so much training that you can access online now. Sometimes you get stuff even for free. If you wanted to get started with Spark AR from Facebook, for example, the entire curriculum is available for free via the Facebook website, and some more. There's loads of people who've taken to YouTube to share all of their kind of, tips and tricks and how do you get started with your first face filter and all that stuff. But it can't end there. If you have access to the tools, if you have access to the training, what is always lacking are two big things: context and community. Without any context, it's quite hard to then you might end up in the realm of kind of zombie games or crazy cat memes and stuff. So having some kind of context for your work, some kind of topic that you want to explore is really important, but also fundamentally community. It's so important to be able to share your skills as you're going along with a community of people who also maybe, oh, I got so far with the shader on this augmented reality experience, but God, how does anyone make it look really realistic with all the beautiful lighting? I'm really pleased to say that there are amazing online communities. So even the Spark AR creator community has over 80,000 people waiting at their keyboards to help you pick through all the different problems that you might have in terms of the development and your experience. And of course, then finally, in terms of offering that context and community, the importance of running programs. So amazing, people like the National Arts Council, etc., have sponsored our programs whereby we can then have people like us to come in and give the creators a little bit of structure, a little bit of kind of, organizing the people and then having that community around you to kind of then, as a cohort, being able to ask each other things and kind of sometimes riff off each other and develop things together. Managing artists is very much like herding cats at times. So, having that kind of program to join is kind of quite essential. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Kay. We have a question, a question and comment from Barbara, who raises a really good perspective on technology and culture. Culture is not just about production and consumption, but also about participation. With the increase of the mediation between human creator, actor, and human audience, and the need for technological expertise, are we at risk of limiting participation? How can social engagement by companies increase the possibility of participation? I'd like to open this to all three of our speakers. Jian Hong?
I can try and answer from my perspective. I do think that this digital divide or this digital literacy or the need for technology to access certain content or participate is an issue. So I think there are a lot of work that needs to be done. At the same time, this, like you did in your introduction, that there is more than a generation now of people who are born into the internet age, that this is the world that is very much second nature to them. So, for example, I know some efforts by some of my colleagues who have gone into creating content and loading them on MP3 and sending them out to seniors who have no access to technology during the circuit breaker, during the lockdown, so that they can still have access to digital content. But that's really one household at a time. So I do think that there are so many things that needs to be done. For us, our effort first starts with the art makers, because without healthy art makers who have sort of running in the front to explore some of the possibilities and looking after themselves in terms of the needs to express and needs to create and the need to connect, we can't possibly create good work, and we can't possibly reach out to the people that we want to reach out to and give voice to the things that we want to give voice to. So that's one of the reasons why we decided to create the system, and it's totally done open source. So the idea is, once these things are done, I can send you all the files, and the entry point is actually a UK single board computer called Raspberry Pi, which was created by the foundation in UK to make digital coding accessible for young people, that they can all have the skills that's going to be their future. So our system is built based on Raspberry Pi with open source software. So anybody, anywhere can take the 3D printing file and create your own system and run with it. And the reason is because I think a lot of companies, even in Singapore, with access to funding, it's too difficult to buy all the equipment, get all these things done, bring a cameraman, rehearse with you through the whole process. How do you let the artists have more control, right? The way we have done all our shows is pretty much actors look for camera. Camera doesn't look for actors. So it's almost like actors blocking themselves to camera, right? And they rehearse with cameras because it's their handphone from day one. Whereas if I need to bring a professional camera crew, I won't be able to have that process where the actors are still passive, right? So the idea is, how do we first look after that first layer that is closest to us to make sure that they are still empowered with access to technology, access to knowledge that is, as democratized as possible, so that it is, possible for them to start running and then to be able to, spearhead other efforts that is needed to reach our audiences and our community.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds also like the awareness that within technology and embracing the digital within the arts, we also are quite we are able to be empowered to also subvert certain kinds of systems that may not be equitable to everyone, that are coming from more commercial intentions that exist within technology and the digital world. And it is precisely within the arts where we're able to challenge these things, these issues, whether to call them out or to, as you have done, you explained, really create new systems really kind of confronting it and saying, no, we're going to make it more equitable, more democratic. And I think the open source approach is something that makes it more accessible to everyone. Yeah. Would anyone else like to comment on this? I think there are definitely concerns within the arts also towards the digital because of its nature of encouraging instant gratification and consumerism as well. And then on the other side is also where there are false expectations in the measurements of outcomes, because sometimes how many views you have online does not necessarily equate to meaningful engagement, as it's sometimes pegged to also say more real things like your marketing budget, the amount of ads you're able to buy for those kind of viewers. So there's definitely that fine line that I think within the arts we have to tread between how we value and how we define the projects and our outcomes as well. So maybe Kay, did you have a response to that initial question or this? Yeah.
We often talk about the digital divide, but I think we often forget as well that the kind of pocket rocket that everyone has nowadays, the smartphone. And I say in inverted commas everyone, because yes, of course it's not everyone, but even in a country like Thailand, for example, in 2019 they recorded 72% of penetration of smartphones, and that is projected to grow in 2025 to 87% of the population having access to a smartphone. So, with an internet connection and a smartphone, you can actually achieve quite a lot. Certainly with augmented reality, which is what we've been focusing on a lot, allowing audiences around the world to kind of consume and also participate in some kind of experience from a visual artist is kind of what we're recording, right? So for example, with Moo Park, of course, that was in January, right? In the middle still of this craziness. And we recorded 8,000 visitors over the couple of months period, all socially distanced, etc. However, through the augmented reality experiences, which is put together on a digital showcase, we got almost 400,000 impressions from far-flung corners like Israel, Japan, Uruguay. This is like, how can a tiny little show done by 8 artists in Singapore reach all of those people? And some more, they are participating by actually creating selfies using the art of the Singaporean artists, and that all of that artwork is then on their face, and then they're sharing it with their friends, etc. And hey, my friend in Israel, have a look at this, you know, and this is cool by this Singaporean artist. So I think, yes, there are, of course, digital divide issues, but I think that, you know, with the advent of new kind of technologies and new smartphones, you know, there's even new smartphones coming out with, you know, styluses. You can kind of start to draw on the go and all that kind of stuff, and then instantly start sharing that with your friends. So I think that that yes, there are challenges, but there's such a humongous amount of opportunity as well. So.
Yeah, definitely. Sarah, do you have any thoughts to this, whether it be about digital equity, making it more equal for everyone, or about the fact that there are tendencies for it to potentially cross into instant gratification, coming from very consumerism kinds of points of view? Over here in the chat, I see that Delvin has also remarked similarly on how audiences, would they be coming from Netflix and Disney or gaming, and then how would they choose and what would entice them? So I think there's a recognition also that once we move into digital stages, we cross over into platforms where audiences are used to different modes of entertainment, and their attention spans, their expectations are different. How do we as the presenters then navigate that and not feed them on a mode of a diet that may not be so useful for when they have to watch a live performance, which is usually a long duration, requires patience and being in the moment? I think this is something we struggle with. Are we talking about two different complete strategies for two different spaces? Where do we come to in the end, maybe? So yeah, one of those things that I said, maybe Sarah, you can take on.
all of those things. I'll be really frank, I think it's our job to disrupt those spaces and create meaning and provide meaning. It's not good enough for us to say they're just spaces that, you know, we can't use or provide instant gratification, and that's bad. I think it's our job to get out there. I think that if we sit back and don't engage with a whole generation where this Instagram, reading your Instagram feed is a form of reading. It's a form of transaction. We are storytellers and we know how to tell story. Let's find those spaces and let's disrupt them, and let's place story that is wonderful and magical and meaningful and architect them. Now that might mean we may need to think differently about how we create our stories, but it doesn't mean that we need to compromise in the standards or the curation or the craft. And I think that's really important. It's not a binary issue. It's really about looking at the truth of the world we're in right now, looking at the connected access that people have right now. And it's not that dissimilar to the printing press, and it's always the analogy people have used around the internet. But it wasn't the making of the innovation wasn't the making of the printing press. The innovation was when we stopped using Latin, because it wasn't an accessible form, of language. And that's what's interesting about it. So as arts organizations, how do we use language? How do we use storytelling? How do we use these new technologies to craft and connect? And it's not an either or where you go, that's where it is now and that's what we'll do. It's that we're looking at an editorial offer now as performing arts organizations. We're looking at our stages are not just a stage, the stage that we have had for the past hundreds of years. We are looking at multiple stages, and we are a multi-platform organization. And that's super interesting, but what it does do is challenge us around our structures. It challenges around us around our people, and it challenges us around about connection with audience. And I go, let's go for it. And the other thing is, let's not work on our own. Let's also, as arts organizations, be really connected around that. There's nothing proprietarial about us having a greater following than anyone else. It's because we share our audiences, and that's another important issue.
Yeah. Yes, thank you so much, Sarah. So we have just maybe 2 minutes, and I want to ask each of our speakers, what is your advice for an arts organization which is embarking on digital transformation and making the best conditions possible for that to happen? What are, very quickly, just a few key things that you think have to be the ingredients to make sure that that can happen well? Can I start with Kay?
From my perspective, it's you've got to have tools, right? And that's where I started. So when I wanted to create that very first show at Art Science Museum, I knew that I needed tools and training. So I instantly reached out directly to Autodesk and said, look, I'm doing this show, and we really want to do stuff like 3D printing and kind of crazy VR stuff. Is there anything whereby we could do a kind of bit of a changeover, right? So if you give me some tools and some training, I can give you back some really amazing transformational stories about how these artists have used Autodesk software to then really revolutionize what they're doing. They've created, maybe some sketches on a piece of paper that is then going to become this physical object, but via the medium of using, Autodesk software and training and all that good stuff. So I think it's trying to establish partnerships. There are technology companies out there who may well be willing to support you, and especially more so if you have the support of, the National Arts Council or some kind of funding behind you, so that they're not kind of feeling like, oh no, the technology company feels like I need to bankroll this entire thing. If there's already kind of some interest there, and and you kind of saying that there's opportunities here to have some really amazing storytelling around your own technology and how artists are, and then harnessing the creator community to breathe life into your otherwise quite boring press release about your technology that no one else is going to read. It gives you a whole new world of the art press that might actually, an art media that actually might be interested in your technology.
Yeah, so tools, training, reciprocal exchange, and partnerships.
Yes.
Yeah. Jianhong?
I think, I really, what Sarah shared just now really resonated with me. I think that in some ways, we have to throw away some, assumed hierarchy, that what is worthy, what's worthwhile of effort, to me, it's actually no different from doing traditional theater, right? It's always about, you have a story to tell that you really want to tell. But in this case, you have to have people who are very curious to explore. And you have to have lots of time to burn. And you're going to be getting ready to fail many times because nobody really knows how to do this, But most important of all, maybe to answer what Delvin also saying about this Netflix Disney Plus is, I don't think that audience who will go to Disney and Netflix are our audience anyway. I think there are people who will go to the theater and not so much interested in Netflix, and there are people who go to Netflix and never go to the theater, right? The assumption that everybody needs theater is actually quite flawed. So instead of thinking about losing our audience to Netflix, we can think about grabbing our audience from Netflix, because just like gaming and online television, I think that there's something that we can offer that is different. So it's up to us to go and figure it out.
Yeah, I think what I took away from that was re-examining our assumptions all the time, and then from there, really seeing what is the potential that aligns with the mission and the work that you really want to do, and being quite responsive and adaptive as well. Yeah, thank you so much, Jianhong. Lastly, Sarah, any key things that you think, the ingredients to make good conditions?
You got to know what you want to say. You just, if you don't have something meaningful to say, people know. It doesn't matter how you try and share it in whatever context. So you've got to, that's what I would say, is that know what you want to say, then work out who you want to say it to, and then work out how you want to do it.
Yeah.
And always work with people that are more amazing than you, because it's also really exciting. But always bring in people and know your truth.
Yeah, I think those are good words to close our question and answer session and also the talks that we've had today. I'd really like to thank the speakers for their time and all their generous insights. I hope this was useful. So thank you, everyone. And I would now like to hand over to Rochelle Tan to tell us more about the upcoming AAPPAC events that are happening. Over to you, Rochelle.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rochelle. I'm the Secretary General of AAPPAC. Thank you once again to Sarah, Kay, and Xian Hong for the wonderful sharing and insights, and special thanks as well to Faith for moderating today's session. So these are the upcoming AAPPAC events. We will be convening for an online conference this year in October. We're going to continue with our digital Unpacked theme, but we're going to focus on the digital audience. And how COVID has changed the way we reached out, changed the way we engage, and our audience development strategies, but also importantly, what it means as we come back to live. We're also pleased to announce that we have launched the AAPPAC Connecting series, and this is really an opportunity for new works, new ideas to be pitched to the AAPPAC network of venues, arts and related companies for touring, for opportunities for collaborations, co-producing, co-commissioning. We welcome proposals from all. For the first time, this platform will also be open to non-AAPPAC members. So please do fill in your applications and send them into the Secretariat by 8th of September. So in line with our overall theme for this year, we are going to look for projects that are born out of or can be presented within the constraints of the pandemic, or that incorporate a clever use of technology. And as our very inspiring panel has also talked about repeatedly, it's not just about technology for the sake of technology, but really how meaningful it can be and about the storytelling and what we want to say. So we will be looking at projects that are focused that way and how they use technology in a meaningful way in the art making or in the art experience and the storytelling. Proposals are to be submitted to us by 8th of September. The pitch presentation itself will take place during the conference in October. So if you are interested or have any questions, please feel free to contact the AAPPAC Secretariat. Jacqueline and I are happy to take any questions you might have. So thank you, and may I just invite Chairman to close today's session.
Thanks, Rochelle, and thank you everybody for being part of it today. And many thanks to our speakers. They were inspirational. I learned a lot. I hope you did too. Thanks for Faith for chairing it and being the interlocutor. You did a fantastic job. So as always, I take my hat off to Rochelle and to Jack for all the great work that they do. And I thank you for joining us, taking the time to join us. AAPPAC hopes to remain helpful and relevant to our member organisations, but to arts workers right across Asia Pacific. So thank you all again for joining us, and we hope to see you at the sessions that we have planned for you. And of course, if you're members of AAPPAC, we hope to see you at the annual conference that is being planned coming up. If you've got any thoughts about the areas for discussion, please let us know, or feedback on today's session. We'd love to hear about it. So thank you, stay well, and we look forward to at least online very soon. Thank you.